Dark shadows across the Forth Estuary. The Forth Estuary, an incredible sight to behold. The Firth of Forth is the culmination of several Scottish rivers, including the River Forth. It meets the North Sea, with Fife on the north coast and Lothian on the south. Inchkeith Island, situated in the Forth Estuary, sits 4 miles from Edinburgh. The island features a fascinating history and widely documented. In 1493, the island became the setting of a bizarre linguistic experiment by King James IV. James's love of language, combined with his natural curiosity, led him to conceive of his peculiar experiment. The king ordered 2 newborn babies to live on the isolated island of Inchkeith, to be raised by a deaf-mute woman. He aimed to see what language, if any, the children acquired. Because with no other linguistic input, he believed that this language, whatever it may be, must surely be the natural, God-given language of humanity. The experiment a failure. The outcome was resulting in the 2 children mute for years to come. In 1497, Inchkeith and neighbouring Inchgarvie employed as a sanctuary to house plague victims from Edinburgh. Used as an isolated refuge for victims of Grand Gore, an old Scots name for syphilis. The Grand Gore Act passed in September 1497. Inchkeith and other islands in the Forth, such as Inchgarvie, became a place of compulsory retirement for people suffering from this disease. Authorities told them to board a ship at Leith. Once there, instructed to remain till God provide for their health. Death would most certainly follow them. In 1589, the small isolated piece of land used to quarantine Russian sailors on a plague-ridden vessel. The bodies of those who died from the deadly illness remain buried there today. Along this extensive stretch of coastline lies many fascinating and historic properties. It is here, inside one of them, that we begin the story. Local tradition has it that Barnbougle Castle, on the shore opposite Hound Point Island, belonged initially to a noble family called Mowbray, whose most famous member, Sir Roger, was a member of the Knights of St. John. To become a fully fledged member of the order, a knight had to take part in a Middle East crusade. As Sir Roger made his way down to the rocky path beneath Barnbougle Castle to reach the little sailing ship, his faithful hunting hound rushed after him. Just as the boat cast off, it jumped aboard, and Sir Roger did not have the heart to put the dog to shore, and so it accompanied him to the Holy Land. In Palestine, it stood beside his master in many battles, until in the end, in one conflict, the knight was cut down and slain. What became of the dog is not recorded, but said that on dark winter nights, when the wind whips up gales and rages out in the Forth, its mournful howls are heard as it hunts for a long-lost master, and so the rocky bank is known as Hound Point. Local legend recalls the sound of a ghostly phantom canine, usually alone but on occasion accompanied by a white-robed Arab warrior. Upon appearing, it is said to convey ill health for the current owners of Barnbougle. Local legend insists that the apparition has arrived to carry off a family member, and that following his ghostly visit, one always dies. In William Wallace Fyfe's Summer Life on Land and Water at South Queensferry, the legend of the Hound Point of Barnbougle reads as follows. Long, long had the mail-clad Templar fought beneath the blood-red cross, where many a knight was slain in fight with none to mourn his loss. At length through the keep, by the waters deep, there thrilled a bugle's sound. A death wail passed on the midnight blast, where Sir Roger met the hound. And a darksome form appeared, winding that solemn wail. In the ebbing tide, a hound by his side, but neither shall nor sail. And ever when Barbugle's lords are parting this scene below, come hound and ghost to that haunted coast, and death notes winding slow. Cramond Kirk dates to 1500s. The scenic and ancient kirkyard holds great historical significance. Oliver Cromwell's invasion of 1651 involved removing the kirk bell, only for it to be returned to its rightful location years later. Robert Louis Stevenson spent time in the village, and it helped him inspire Kidnapped. The graveyard is extensive and contains the grave of the first casualty of World War II. Two remarkable local tales exist of the kirk. Although not supernatural in content, they provide interesting reading. The tower contains a bell, cast in about 1619 for the kirk. The bell sounded before the 11 AM service on Sundays and had an exciting history. Clergy could ring the church bell from outside the tower. In the small hours one morning, its furious ringing awoke the neighbourhood. On venturing to investigate the early morning disturbance, residents found it to be a goat that had got into the churchyard and was tugging at the rope. This story dates to when the iron mills were in full flourish on the Amund. Some of the workers used to take iron rods, sharpen the ends, then go out to Cramond Island to spearfish. One night, after a successful day of fishing, the men called in at the local Cramond Inn. After celebrating their success for some time, they emerged drunkenly and made their way up the hill to their homes. However, as they passed the church, a fight broke out, during which a rod was thrown into the air, but it never came back down. The drunks went on their merry way home and forgot all about it. The rod had got stuck in a branch joint in the tree. As the tree grew around the rod, it wedged more firmly into the structure and remained there for many years. As time passed, the rod was often referred to as the Cramond Kirk Gibbet. The historic Cramond Inn, situated in the confines of picturesque Cramond village. Built in early 1700s and has served as a coach house and inn, the building has served as an integral part of the local community. The B-listed building sits adjacent to Cramond Island and provides breathtaking views from its beer garden. On warm summer days, this welcome haunt is most definitely the place for visitors to the area. When darkness arrives, the Cramond Inn takes on a very different guise. For years, staff have reported unexplained noises within the confines of the pub. The sound of glasses rattling in the dead of night and mysteriously discovered smashed in the morning by early arriving staff. Sometime in early 2000s, a staff member, while clearing tables in the dining area, saw movement from behind the bar. Alone in the pub, the puzzled staff member recalled a shadowy figure standing watching and then disappearing in the blink of an eye. Upon reaching the bar's rear, some minutes later, and confronted with the sight of broken glass upon the floor. A visitor from Australia in 2009 enjoyed a visit to the pub one day in the early months of the year. Having visited in 1992, he reports discussing with a fellow patron. The man sitting by the fireplace and close to the dartboard sat before him. The conversation continued only for the customer to vanish before his very eyes. When asked details of the mysterious customer, he recalls the man being nothing out of the ordinary and fitting in with other diners and visitors that day. In 2018, a visiting family from Spain claimed to have encountered a similar apparition towards the Cramondin's rear. The figure vanished through the lounge's back and disappeared as they sat eating their lunch after visiting neighbouring Cramond Island. When asked, they could not explain what they saw that day. No other customers were present during their stay that afternoon. The pub remains closed during the early months of 2021, but will hopefully reopen as the year progresses. Hopefully, you may get the chance to visit this long-established Cramond landmark and possibly meet its restless resident for yourself. Travelling from Cramond and along a long and winding road, you find yourself confronted by a magnificent Gothic structure. Situated at 36 Marine Drive sits the majestic Muir House Mansion. The Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Scotland describes the mansion as an extravagant Gothic Tudor mansion. Built 1830, with a plethora of ornamental chimneys, windows and gables full of Gothic detail, and crowned by a battlemented tower. The spectral figure of a grey lady sighted within the grounds and immediate area. The ghost considered to be that of Lady Oliphant. The ghostly apparition, sighted as far afield as the remains of the old towers situated in the Salvesen area and demolished in the 1960s. If travelling along the dark stretch of road known as Marine Parade, look out for Lady Oliphant's spectral figure travelling along the ancient path and towards the direction of Muir House Mansion. She is seeking revenge against her son, responsible for her murder so many years ago. On the outskirts of Cramond and Silverknowes sits the iconic Lauriston Castle. Considered to date back to medieval times, the original castle razed to the ground in 1544 during battle. Reconstruction commenced in 1590. The owner, Sir Alexander Napier, Lord Lauriston, occupied the property until he died in 1629. The renowned Scots poet Sir Walter Scott wrote of Lauriston Castle in his 1827 journal. Went with Tom Allen to see his building at Lauriston, where he's displayed good taste, supporting instead of tearing down or destroying the old chateau which once belonged to the famous Mississippi law. The additions are in very good taste and will make a most comfortable house. As well as its notable connections, the property boasts extensive and lavish grounds. The area is a favourite to visitors and those with interest in the castle's history. This attractive Edinburgh landmark also has its very own ghosts. A previous manager of the castle, named David, recalls a ghostly event which occurred one day. It was the end of the day and locking up for the day and closing the many windows and shutters when something caught his attention. A figure walked past him as clear as day into the sitting room and past the bathroom where he stood. The incident culminated in a door closing behind the visitor. There was not a single person in the building except for the startled manager. On another occasion, the same manager was alerted to a swishing sound as he moved a costume collection that day. The sound of a ribbed silk dress and something brushing past convinced the staff member of 30 years that he was not alone. David has a theory about who it could be. Sophia, the 19th century wife of Andrew, Lord Rutherford, Solicitor General and friend of William Henry Playfair. Discovering she was dying, she wrote her husband a poignant letter to be delivered to him only on her death. Sophia died in the bedroom and may continue to inhabit the area today. The sound of ghostly footsteps upon the stairs, reported on many occasions, and considered the ghost of a previous butler. The chilling and eerie sounds echo throughout the castle, long after the final visitors have since departed. Nestled in the confines of the Granton area of the city sits a mansion with a considerable history. Caroline Park House, constructed in 1696 for Sir George Mackenzie, 1st Viscount of Tarbet. The location, previously the site of Royston House, completely rebuilt as Caroline Park. With connecting links to the architecture of Holyrood Palace, remnants still exist today. The French Baroque architecture sits dominantly adjacent to the Forth Estuary. The iconic towers which grace West Shore Road are a reminder of the mansion's ancient history. A suitably haunted history. Alicia Ann Spottiswoode, the famous Scottish singer-songwriter and wife to Lord John Montagu Douglas Scott, son of the 4th Duke of Buccleuch, supposedly had a strange experience at Caroline Park House. She was said to be in the drawing room alone, suddenly alerted to the sight of a spectral cannonball entering through the window and bouncing along the floor. When the serving staff arrived to see what had distressed her, the cannonball had vanished and the window was unbroken. The event reported again in 1879 when a governess at Caroline Park House had a similar experience. Loud banging noises, thought to be the phantom cannonball, became a common experience. A second apparition is also said to haunt the house and grounds. A green lady, identified as Lady Royston, is said to emerge from the garden well and glide to the front door before disappearing. Residents of the area have recalled these and other ghostly stories for many years. Sharon Wood, a resident of Caroline Park House, relays her memories of the time.
One evening back in the mid-1970s, I sat alone in a section of Caroline Park House where I lived with my family. My mother worked as a cleaner for Ian Rowland Architects. I think it was a Friday and I was babysitting for my niece and nephews. They slept in the adjoining room of our section of the house. At around about 9 p.m. or thereabout, I noticed a light from across the courtyard. It came from an upstairs part of the building which was unoccupied. It resembled candlelight and was moving throughout the building, slowly past the windows. In a panic, I collected the children, brought them through to the room beside me and locked the doors. I presumed that it might be burglars with no access to a phone decided to sit it out until my family returned. Suddenly, I was alerted to the sound of a large crash directly from above where I stood. The office upstairs from us, used by the architect, was also vacant at this time of night, and nobody else should have been inside the building. The sound of furniture crashing from upstairs filled me with terror. I could hear drawers opening and the contents ransacked as whoever present in the room rampaged throughout. Eventually, the noise ceased, and with it, whoever was upstairs appeared to depart the building. Upon my family's return, and after relaying the terrifying night's events, we checked upstairs to survey the damage. My mum unlocked the door to the architect's office, and to my shock, the room remained untouched. There was no single item out of place or any indication that anyone had been inside a securely locked room.
On another occasion, whilst playing in the building's attic space with her niece, Sharon met with an unexplained and terrifying scenario. It began with the sound of slow and steady-paced footsteps along the house's flat roof section. The startled girl looked from the window and, although the middle of the day and in broad daylight, could see nobody on the roof. Sharon suddenly jolted as a sound from the rear of the attic caught her attention. She turned around and watched in horror as the small service elevator slowly began to ascend towards the area in which she stood. The sound of the lift ascending the building towards her filled her with complete, unadulterated terror. Nobody else in the entire structure could have possibly activated the slowly approaching, creaking device. Having spoken recently with the current custodians, I am unsure if Caroline Park House's ghostly tales continue today. The building, now a residential property with no recent reports of any paranormal activity or things that go bump in the night. The caretaker remains convinced that the Green Lady has long since vanished. The eerie sound of a bell ringing in the dark of night, more likely a nautical matter than a paranormal one. The sound of howling coastal winds echoes through Caroline Park House's grounds and neighbouring ghostly properties today. Their dark shadows remain, cascading across the dark and lonely waters of the Forth Estuary.